Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Today, our topic is how to heal our gut to prevent and reverse every type of disease. My guest is Dr. Steven Gundry, who is a world-famous cardiothoracic surgeon and an expert on gut health, best-selling author, and is releasing a brand new book called Gut Check: Unleash the Power of Your Microbiome to Reverse Disease and Transform Your Mental, Physical, and Emotional Health. Dr. Gundry, welcome back to the show. It's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Lori, and great to see you as well.
So you've been talking about gut health for many, many years, and really one of the first people to talk. I've interviewed you about this many years ago, and yet you're still so passionate about this topic and still have so much to say about it. You know, you always talk about, at the beginning of your books, when you talk about gut health, Hippocrates, and how even though this phenomenon of gut health is relatively new to the scientific community, in a way, it's thousands of years old, right?
You know, you're absolutely right. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said 2,500 years ago that all disease begins in the gut. And this book really is, the culmination of my research and other people's research to show that Hippocrates was right, that all disease begins in the gut. And the good news is that all disease can be reversed in the gut. And that's the important message to take home.
It really is. And what I really love about this, and a lot of people don't realize, is that your gut really can impact your heart health. And we know that heart disease is our #1 killer. A lot of people think, yeah, well, the gut, yeah, that's for things like IBS and digestive problems. But you're still talking about heart issues, too, and dementia and brain issues, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny. I've become good friends with Dr. Dale Bredesen, who wrote The End of Alzheimer's, and Dr. David Perlmutter, who wrote uric acid, drop acid, and also brain. And so here's two neurologists and a heart surgeon and cardiologist. And we all, when we talk, say, who would have imagined that all of these disciplines would actually arrive at some place that we would have never imagined in our training, and that, dementia comes from the gut, heart disease comes from the gut, diabetes comes from the gut, and mood changes come from the gut. Everything that Hippocrates talked about, and we're just beginning to understand, why that occurs.
And not only those chronic diseases, but also more acute conditions, like as we enter into cold and flu season, we talk about how our immune system, like 70 to 80% of the immune system, is located in the gut.
You're right. 70 to 80% of all of our white blood cells, our immune cells, are located down lining the gut wall. And if you've got leaky gut or intestinal permeability, which is a real thing, all these white blood cells are distracted with this war effort down in our gut, and they're not available to take care of the viruses and the bacteria that, are constantly we're exposed to. And that explains why people with, chronic diseases like heart disease, like high blood pressure, like diabetes, were much more susceptible to not only catching COVID, but also from dying from COVID, because the immune system was distracted. And that goes the same with cancer. We know that cancer is becoming more and more common in young people. Now we're telling people to get colonoscopy in their 40s rather than their 50s. And a recent report shows that women breast cancer now is a 40-year-old problem, not a 50-year-old problem. Why is that? Because our immune system has been completely distracted by what's going on in our gut and isn't available to be looking for the things that it was originally designed to be on the watch for.
And you mentioned just a moment ago this idea of leaky gut. And as I was reading your book, it was so concerning and discouraging, really, when you talked about how thin The lining of our intestines, that's the gut wall, how thin it is. I think you said it was only 1 cell thick. And so it's easy to see how you can poke a hole through it, and then you would have this leakage. And so you call this thing leaky gut, where things that are supposed to stay in our intestines are getting out and causing all kinds of problems. So let's talk about, number one, how do you know if you have a leaky gut, or more importantly, how do you fix a leaky gut or prevent getting one?
I still see patients 6 days a week, even on the weekends. And we now are able to test for leaky gut. We can actually do it at-home finger prick test. But 100% of people that I see with any issue, and I do mean that literally, if you've got headaches, guarantee you have leaky gut. If you have IBS, you have leaky gut. If you have anxiety, depression, you have leaky gut. If you have prediabetes, insulin resistance, if you have an autoimmune disease, 100% of people I see have leaky gut. If you have heart disease, coronary artery disease, if you've had a stent, you have leaky gut. It's that prevalent.
Because the lining of the gut, it's like tissue paper. It's so easy to break. And so let's talk about how, what some of the things that cause a leaky gut and how to stop doing that.
I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that really amazed me, once we had tests that could identify what sort of antibodies we have against various foods in our diet, one of the shocking things is that 100% of people with leaky gut have antibodies to the various forms of wheat germ agglutinin, gluten, non-gluten proteins, rye, barley, oats. They have antibodies to these things. Even if I have people who have been gluten-free for 10 years that still have active antibodies against the various forms of wheat. And that's a real eye-opener. And wheat germ agglutinin is actually in whole wheat. And telling people they should be eating whole grains is actually a very recent part of our diet. No one ate whole grains when I was growing up. And we were removing some of the harmful particles in these grains. The other thing that's shocking is that 70% of people with leaky gut, in my practice, 70% of them react to the various components of corn with antibodies as well. That's pretty scary. And what happens is that we know that compounds in grains like lectins, which I became famous for, are one of the really easy ways to poke holes in the wall of our gut. And once we do have holes in the wall of our gut, our immune system is exposed to these compounds, which our immune system would have never seen back in the good old days.
Every time I read one of your books, I learn so much more. And this one was fantastic because you talked about some of the so-called health foods that can cause leaky gut, that can poke holes in that very fragile gut lining. Like you were saying, the whole wheat, and you recommend white sourdough bread, which I love. So thank you very much. But then you were also talking about some of the foods that have these lectins, like things that we think are really healthy, like tomatoes, the seeds and the skins of the tomatoes, and some of the other health foods. So I would recommend to our viewers to check out the book, because you really get into detail about some of these health foods that could, so-called health foods that could be causing a leaky gut. So we're going to take a quick break and be right back with Dr. Steven Gundry. The book is called Gut Check: Unleash the Power of Your Microbiome to Reverse Disease and Transform Your Mental, Physical, and Emotional Health. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living, and we are continuing our discussion with Dr. Steven Gundry, author of the book Gut Check: Unleash the Power of Your Microbiome to Reverse Disease and Transform Your Mental, Physical, and Emotional Health. Dr. Gundry, before the break, we were talking about some of these lectins and some of these other so-called health foods that can really cause problems for the lining of our gut. And I mentioned whole wheat, tomatoes. And beans aren't beans? Can you go over some of the other things that people might be eating a lot of that they probably shouldn't?
Yeah, beans are actually notorious for containing lectins, and there's a bean that's popular in the South. I went to medical school in Georgia, the peanut. The peanut is not a nut at all. It's actually a legume, a bean. And peanuts have some of the worst lectins that anybody can eat, and yet we think of them as a wonderful snack. Cashews, for instance, is also lectin containing. But traditional cultures, and I talk a lot about traditional cultures and what they've done, learned through the centuries of how to detoxify these potentially mischievous foods, because we got to get calories, obviously. And cultures have always figured out a way to ferment their vegetables to lessen lectins. Many people don't realize that soaking beans is actually fermenting beans. If anybody's had a bunch of beans in a pot of water, they'll notice foam comes up to the top. And that foam is actually the fermentation of the bacteria on those beans actually eating the lectins. And that's why traditionally you're taught to soak your beans for 24 hours or 48 hours before cooking. Pour off the water every few hours because you're getting rid of those lectins. But that's long ago been forgotten. I traveled to Italy and France a lot, and the Italians always peel and deseed their tomatoes and peppers before they cook with them because they've been taught by their great-great-great-grandmother that that's how to detoxify these things. And it's just fascinating to learn where these traditions came from. For instance, corn, as most of us know, is native to the Americas, but Native Americans who first used corn always treated corn with lye. They soaked it in lye to actually deactivate the lectins in corn. And we've completely forgotten that. And so hominy and hominy grits is deactivated corn. And most of us have forgotten why that was done in the first place.
Yeah, and so it's nice. It is actually encouraging that those of us who love certain foods like beans, we can still eat them as long as we soak them. And you, even in your book, have examples of lentils, even ones that are canned. You recommend a brand name that are okay because they prepare them the right way. So it's all in the preparation. And you talk also extensively about glyphosate and some of the other ingredients found in non-organic food. So this is another reason to try to eat organic if possible, right? Because these things can really harm our gut, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Most people are beginning to understand the word glyphosate. It's in Roundup. That's the active ingredient in the weed killer. Unfortunately, glyphosate Roundup is used widely in our regular food products. So most people associate Roundup with GMO foods, but now all of our corn, all of our wheat, all of our oats are sprayed with Roundup before harvesting to kill the plant. It makes it easier to kill. So just conventional foods have been treated with Roundup. And what I and others have shown is that unfortunately, glyphosate is a really good way to destroy friendly bacteria in your gut, your friendly microbiome, and it actually potentiates things like wheat causing leaky gut. Many areas in Europe have now banned glyphosate because they've discovered that this connection is real. But even some of our organic oat products are still loaded with glyphosate because it's sprayed on a field next door and drifts on over. Most most California wines have glyphosate in the wine because the weeds between the vines were sprayed with glyphosate.
Oh, very, very interesting. So we talk about some of these foods that seem healthy that really are not very good for our gut. Let's switch now to some of the obvious ones like sugar and processed foods. How bad are those types of things? Can we have them every once in a while?
Sure, but the problem has been we've been unaware that inside of our intestines live 100 trillion bacteria. And just to give you the enormity of what that number means, we know that there are 8 trillion trees in the world on Earth. 8 trillion. It's been counted. So there are 92 trillion more bacteria in each of our guts than there are trees in the world. There's that many. And what we are beginning to understand is that these bacteria have certain foods that they need to eat to grow and prosper. And these bacteria that are good for us have to have what are called resistant starches or prebiotic fiber to make the compounds that will keep us healthy and actually keep the wall of our gut healthy. And unfortunately, sugar and all these processed foods are completely devoid of these prebiotic fibers that our great grandparents used to eat routinely. And so we've completely starved the huge part of us that actually keeps us healthy of the foods they need. And once we starve them, what's really scary is they almost never come back unless we actively intervene. And that's what Gut Check is about as well.
So, those of us novices, at first I thought, oh, yay, I'm taking a probiotic and eating kimchi every once in a while and, having yogurt. So I've got the probiotics, I've got those gut bacteria in me. And then I read your book and I realized, oh, wait, we have to feed those bacteria. And so they'll die if we don't feed them with things like, I think you said they really love dandelion greens and jicama and asparagus and all types of things like that. You have a long list of the types of prebiotics that are probiotics that the bacteria need to eat all the time.
Yeah, it's amazing. If we don't keep giving these guys what they want to eat, and we have nice lists in the book and great recipes on how to do it, we know that they'll just kind of give up the ship and not produce these compounds that we need for optimal health. And these compounds have a confusing name. They're called postbiotics. So most people have heard of probiotics, friendly bacteria. We're beginning to understand they need food called prebiotics, but they need that food to produce all these compounds that are called postbiotics. And the exciting thing is that these bacteria actually talk to our heart, to our brain. They control our mood. They actually control our hormones. There's an entire chapter about women's hormones being actually controlled and manipulated by the bacteria in our gut. And the take-home message is, for the book, okay, we got to spend as much time taking care of these 100 trillion bugs that live in our gut as we do, taking care of our house, taking care of our car, taking care of our lawn. And if we put that sort of effort into taking care of these guys, the exciting thing is, just like Hippocrates said, they'll take care of us. And that's the whole point of the book.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take another break and be right back with Dr. Steven Gundry. The book is called Gut Check. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and we're talking with Dr. Steven Gundry, author of the book Gut Check. Dr. Gundry, we talked about so many things we shouldn't do. Let's talk about some of the things that we should be doing.
Well, one of the first things that people can do that can make a big difference is to get more fermented foods into their diet. And one of the really easy ways is to enjoy vinegars. Vinegars are actually one of the best fermented foods that you can eat. Believe it or not, I'm the inventor of the fake Coke, where you take sparkling water and put some balsamic vinegar in it, stir it around, and it is one of the best ways to feed friendly bacteria. Also, get yourself some plain sheep yogurt, goat yogurt. It's easy to find even in Trader Joe's. Get yourself coconut yogurt. Studies show that eating these fermented foods with then eating prebiotic fibers is one of the best ways to get better gut bugs, get better emotions. Believe it or not, our good mood actually comes from good bacteria. And so fostering these with fermented foods that are easy to use, like vinegar, pour some vinegar on your vegetables, pour them on your salads, or just have a shot of it, like apple cider vinegar. Easy to do.
Great advice. All right, we're going to take one final break and be right back with Dr. Steven Gundry. The book is called Gut Check. Welcome back, and we're talking with Dr. Steven Gundry about all the ways to improve our gut health, and we really didn't even scratch the surface. You go into a great deal about the importance of polyphenols and olive oil, and so many wonderful recipes are in the book as well. And then you also talk about some of common medications that we should really avoid. Dr. Gundry, any final thoughts?
We've unfortunately really screwed up probably the most important little group of bugs that we should be counting on. But the great news about Gut Check is you can change it within days of changing your diet, and you can repair your leaky gut. Over 94% of autoimmune patients following Gut Check program resolve their autoimmune disease within 9 months. And that's actually incredibly exciting news.
It is, and I'm so glad that we were able to end on such a positive, encouraging note, because we can do it, and you lay out the plan so perfectly in Gut Check. Dr. Gundry, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Lori. Good to see you.
And thanks to you for joining us for this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson, and we'll see you again next week.